What's going on YouTube? This is Ribo back at the bench today, and this time I've got another cut or carry knife review. Today looking at the Reeve Knives Large Sebenza 31 Insingo Micarta. So let's break that down real quick if you are not a Reeve person. So the Sebenza, which is the model of this knife, comes in two different sizes, a large and a small. This is the large, this is the small. The Sebenza has several different variations. It has, I'll just talk about really two. So the 21 and the 31, really they just reference kind of versions. So the 21 is an earlier version. Obviously the 31 is the later version. I will talk about some of the differences of those. This is the 21. I can't remember if I said 31 or 21. This is the 21. This small is the 31. This is called the Insingo blade. This is called the drop point blade. So when I said Insingo micarta, it's the Insingo blade, and this has the micarta inlay, whereas this is a plain Jane version. It does not have any inlay, so it's called a plain Jane or a PJ. I knew none of this until this year when I fell headfirst down the CRK black hole, and I have yet to find my way out. So this is the large 21 Insingo micarta, and my goodness, do I like this knife. So let's do some size comparisons and we will do the review. So I brought this a couple times, but this is the small 31 Sebenza drop point. But this way you can get kind of an idea of size between the large and the small. I was actually surprised, and granted I had carried the small version for quite a while, but I was actually very surprised at how big the large is. Actually, the large is the first Sebenza that I ever tried, and I thought actually is a little bit too big, and so I didn't really want one. After using it and carrying it, I can kind of talk to that. I don't think it's too big at all, but it is quite a bit bigger than the small. I'll bring a couple familiar faces on. So this is the Spyderco PM2, which should be fairly well known. Let's do the Delica because it's the Delica and we have to do the Delica. Let's also throw the K-Bar Dozier out here just to get an idea. And that's probably good. So you can see it is a large knife. I think in general, the small 21, while many people say it's too small, the small 21 actually, if you put it up next to a lot of knives like the Bug Out and the Dozier, the Delica, it actually is a lot closer in size than the large. I'm sorry, anyway. So yeah, that is size for the large 21. All right, so things that I like and I dislike about the large 21 Sebenza. First of all, things that I like, pretty much everything about it. So first of all, the regular spiel about Reeve quality and tolerances and all of that stuff, hydraulic action, yada yada. I make fun because everyone talks about it and everyone makes fun of people who talk about it. But there's a reason you talk about it. It's because it's true. This is a very, very well-made knife, and you have to have one in hand to really understand that. I laughed these off for a long time. I kind of ignored these. I really had no interest in spending this amount of money on a knife. But this is a very, very well-made knife, and there's a reason they demand the price that they do. So first thing I like is that it has that classic Sebenza feel. Super, super smooth. That action is just incredible. I purchased this knife secondhand, and it did have an issue where there was a divot in the path of the detent ball on the blade, and apparently that meant that the previous owner had dropped it while it was open, and it put a divot in the blade. So I worked something out with the previous owner, and I ended up just getting Reeve to replace the blade for me because I really like the knife. And so when he sent it back, when they sent it back, it was incredibly smooth. It's just been incredible, and so it's got that very familiar Sebenza feel to open and close, and that's honestly something that's just, you got to get it in hand to really feel that. So the build quality, the overall Sebenza familiarity and feel and quality of Reeve, that's definitely the first thing I really like about it. Secondly, I first got if you follow the path of the channel, someone first lent me in a 21 large and small. I tried both of those. I liked them, but I didn't really get it yet. And then I actually purchased a 31 and carried this for quite a while, and then purchased a 21. So one of the things that I was a little bit concerned about getting the 21 is if I would like the difference between the lock mechanism on the 21 and the 31. And very quickly, I'll go through this because there are videos in depth about this, and that's not really my thing. But on the 31, you have a ceramic ball detent, which you probably cannot see here. Yeah, I don't think there's any way you're going to be able to see it. But essentially, your lock bar here has at the very top a ceramic ball that acts as the detent ball. And acts as the face of the lock mechanism that actually touches the blade. There are many different advantages to that. It's pretty cool to read about. But one of the practical kind of benefits of that is that you push that ceramic ball over and disengage the blade, and it's totally smooth after that. You don't have that second kind of bump of the detent ball. So like with your 21, which is just a classic frame lock, you push this over, right, to disengage the blade. And as you're pushing, you have that right there. So you have that second kind of bump. You probably either know what I'm talking about or you don't, but you would feel the difference in hand, and it really doesn't matter. But it is a big difference in the smoothness, I guess. And the 31 is just incredibly smooth because of that. I mean, it is, the lockup feels and sounds a little bit different, and the disengage is really, really smooth. And so that's something that I loved about the 31. I was a little bit worried I wouldn't like it about the 21. But honestly, the 21 is super, super smooth as well. You barely notice, honestly, that second, because once you get past there, you're almost, you're pretty much pushing past it. So I like the 21 and the 31, almost the same. I probably prefer the 31 just because of the geekiness of that ceramic ball, and I think it's really cool. But I like the 21. I like the classic frame lock. So that's another thing I like. Another thing that I really like, ergonomics. Totally different than the smaller version, but this is a large size knife, very similar to the PM2 here. And so if you look at these, you can see ergonomically, they're going to be very different. And, the concern may be that this one is not quite as nice to hold, but I think the opposite is actually true. I find the PM2 to be very comfortable in hand. Most of the grips that I'm using, if you're really squeezing down, it's not super comfortable to me back here. But I find the PM2 to be fairly comfortable, although they're doing a lot of grooving and a lot of like form fitting here. And sometimes this spidey hump can be uncomfortable to people, kind of, depending on your hands and whatnot. The Sebenza, however, it has a few things that make it very nice, but otherwise it's very simple, and I think that generally speaking works out quite well for knives. Very, very similar to a similarly priced knife at $20 as opposed to $550. But the K-Bar Dozier does something very, very similar, right? So it's got a few things here that help the grip, but in general, it's going to let you do what you want to do, and it's going to make it very comfortable. The Sebenza does that very, very well, and the large Sebenza just gives you even more room. So you have this little cutout right here. You have some nice beveled edges on the lock bar, and you have really, really incredible, probably my favorite jimping on a knife on the Sebenza up here. It works all around. It's nothing fancy, but over the long haul, this is going to be a very comfortable knife, whether you're cutting for a few minutes or you're cutting for a few hours. This is a very, very comfortable knife to hold. And I'm very, very impressed and have been very impressed actually using it, because you look at it and you don't necessarily think that. But to me, at least, it's very, very ergonomic. Other things that I like. So this was my first Chris Reeve experience with the inlays, and I was a little bit worried about those as well. The plain Jane is awesome, and I may actually even prefer the plain Jane, but I actually use my knives quite a bit, and this 31 gets probably the most use of anything in my collection, and you can see the snail trails and you know the wear and tear on that titanium, and that's going to happen, right? And I love it. It looks well used because it is well used and well loved. The micarta here kind of shields from some of that. This is fairly recently blasted. You can see the difference between the pocket clip, which has a lot of wear, and this side, which, you know, that micarta kind of shields from that. But I really like the look of it, and I've actually enjoyed the feel of it. There's something about these split layers. I don't know on the new 31, excuse me, where the inlay takes up, you know, more of the handle here, and there's not two distinct pieces. But there's something about the two pieces in the valley that they leave right there that actually works very well with my hand. My guess is that that's going to vary from person to person, but for me, that's super comfortable, and I tend to find my hand kind of resting in there. Apart from that, aesthetically, I love the split micarta on the Sebenzas like this. The Incosis have, I believe, the same thing, a little bit different, and I don't quite like it as much, but it's not symmetrical. You know, but it fits with the theme of the knife, and I really like that. I think it looks fantastic. I love that there's only one on this side. I really like the look of it. I like the two, you know, strips here, and I like the utility of it as well. It doesn't detract from the knife like I kind of thought that it might. And so, yeah, the micarta looks great. This is probably my favorite version. I mean, I'm a woodworker, right? So I would love a Sebenza, you know, with some wooden inlays. My problem is, as much as I love wood, I also know wood needs maintenance, right? And so you get the wooden inlays, and hand oils and you know, water and all that stuff is going to do quite a bit more wear on the wooden inlays than the micarta. And so while I really like the look of them, as much as I use my knives and really beat this thing up, I think the micarta is probably the right choice for me, because you can kind of just scrub it out and keep going. Plus, I think you can get the micartas re-blasted, whereas the wooden ones, I want to say you can't. So there's that. All right, other things that I like about the knife. This particular one does not have the blued thumb studs and back spacers like this. I've never really been a blue kind of accent knife guy, but that's just a nitpicky thing. So I do like that. And then the really big thing, I guess I'll mention the steel S35VN. I like it. It's not my favorite. It's a little bit, I have to sharpen a little bit too much for my taste, but you know, besides that, it's a great steel. But really the biggest thing, and actually as I say that, I keep thinking of things I like about this knife. The pocket clip, I've talked about this many times before, but the Sebenza and the CRK pocket clip is just one of my all-time favorites. It's ugly to me. It does not look like much. There are a lot sexier pocket clips out there, but man, does it work. Now, it bends. I've bent at least 3 of them. So, you know, the ramp here is a bit high. Now it's shielded on the micarta version, whereas on the, well, I took it off, so never mind, because I bent it. And so I carry it in a little pocket slip. But on the plain Jane versions, this sticks up a bit high, and I've caught it on some things and bent it back. And once you do that, you can try to bend it back and get it working, but it's never going to have that same feel, so I've always ended up ordering more. But the pocket clip's excellent. But really, what I'm trying to get to is the best thing about this knife, and my first experience, is the Insingo blade. Now, when I first kind of started getting into Chris Reeve knives, and I'm going to throw the drop point on here just so you can see the difference. When I first started getting into Chris Reeve knives and started to really geek out about it, you know, I thought and still think that the drop point Sebenza is just one of the best looking knives that's ever been made. I think that the profile of it, everything about it, to me, this is just one of the most beautiful knives. And don't get me started. Anyway, it's great. I always thought the Insingo blade was super, super ugly. Like I could get it. I could get why it's, you know, why it's desirable and whatnot, but I always thought it was really ugly. Plus the fact that when you close the knife, again, aesthetically, that's really nice. When you close the Insingo, you've got a lot more of that blade sticking out. It just doesn't look as nice. And, you know, I'm primarily function over form, so that shouldn't bother me, but it just always did. However, I heard a lot about the Insingo being an incredible blade, and so when I was looking for my large Sebenza, I decided to just go for it and try out an Insingo. And man, am I glad I did, because the Insingo blade is incredible. First of all, you have this very thin grind down here, this nice hollow grind that all Sebenzas are known for, drop point or Insingo, making this thing just an incredible slicer. It's fantastic for all kinds of work. But the Insingo blade gives you a huge blade, gives you a lot of material here. But it gives you this this fantastic point. So it comes to this great point. You have this nice swedge here. You have this really, really thin grind down here towards the tip, meaning that you can pierce with this. It's still fairly thick at those points, right? So, you know, I think the weakest point is going to be on this tip, and I've seen them break off there. But in general, you're going to be able to pierce really well with this. It's going to be an excellent box cutter because you're coming down to that point right there where the drop point sometimes does have some issues, right? So if you look at that, you can just tell the utility of the Insingo is going to be off the charts. And in general, like even in the kitchen and slicing things and things like that, like the Insingo is just an incredibly useful blade shape. It is still, you know, not the best looking in my opinion, but it is incredibly useful. Really, really great blade shape, and I've come to love it from using it, not from looking at it. And I think honestly, that's kind of the thing about the Sebenza, right? Like you don't get it until you get it in hand and you use it, and then you know kind of sing its praises. That's generally how it goes, and that's definitely how it's gone for me. Getting this knife kind of then prompted me to search for a Nyala, and I ended up getting a Nyala in the Insingo version as well, and I really love that knife. But this is a great EDC, a great hard use knife. Like this is not in my collection, at least, like it's not a collector knife. It's not an art knife. It's not a safe queen. This is a user knife that I use fairly often and abuse, and it takes it all very well. And so you know, yeah. So those are all the things that I like about it. I'm sure there are more. If I sat here and just really picked it apart, I'm sure that I could find more. But those are things that I like about it. And we're at 17 minutes, and I haven't talked about things I dislike. So let me hit that really quick. Things that I dislike. Small detail, but the 21 hole, that's kind of the random machining hole that's not there on the 31. Yeah, you know, it doesn't bug me too much, but I probably like it without that, because without that hole, you could have done some things here with the micarta and probably run that to the end, but it doesn't really bother me all that much. The thumb studs on the Sebenza, especially the small, the large doesn't bother me quite as much, but the thumb studs I've never found particularly comfortable. You know, they look fine, but and honestly they work fine on the large, but they've never been super comfortable to me, so not a huge fan of that. Besides that, that might be it. I have, you know, a couple gripes with S35 VN steel, but nothing too major there. Apart from that, you know, it's a large knife. It's not lightweight. But yeah, apart from that, I think that's it. I don't know. I'm kind of lost at this point, because I've definitely gone head over heels for the CRKs. And hopefully that turns at some point, because I'm ready to start carrying other knives, but this is really all I want in my pocket these days. So cut or carry for me, it's going to be a carry. Carry this all the time. This was in my pocket for something like 6-7 months straight. So big fan of this, and it's definitely not going to be my last CRK. Hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.